Welcome back. It's time for our Reporters Roundtable, where we talk to some of the nation's most influential journalists about things that are trending in our world. Joining me today is Rahiel Testamariam, who is a columnist for The Washington Post, Jeff Johnson, MSNBC political analyst, and Lola Agunnaike, who is a contributor to the Today Show. Thank you all for being here. Perhaps the hottest thing trending right now is the Trayvon Martin's controversy. What do you all make of it, and where do we go from here?
As concerned with the case as I am, I'm concerned with this being the same thing that always happens. So less than 6 months ago with Troy Davis, you had people wearing Troy Davis t-shirts, and now nobody's talking about the death penalty, or the same old folks are talking about the death penalty. So how can we begin to create legitimate substantive movement that comes out of all of these issues that are surrounding the Trayvon piece? How can somebody be allowed to continue to carry a gun when they got an assault against a police officer? All of these things that allowed the Trayvon Martin piece to happen are the pieces that I'm concerned about us dealing with as we're waiting for the trial to start.
Lola, what was interesting to me was for the first 2 weeks, everybody was on the same page about Trayvon Martin. We all showed sympathy. Then all of a sudden, we returned to our normal lives again. Suddenly there was one side against the other. People were blaming Trayvon. Some people were beating up on Zimmerman. What does it mean for us to have that kind of tension in our community?
I don't want to go so far as to say it's polarized a nation, because I don't think it's that deep, but there are definitely people who are pro-Zimmerman, right, and there are people who are pro-Trayvon, and those two, the twain shall never meet.
But the thing that I can't get out of my mind is the fact that there is a $204,000 check in George Zimmerman's PayPal account. What would make somebody write a check to George Zimmerman?
A lot of people think that it's along racial lines, but I think it's well beyond that. I think it has a lot to do with stand your ground and people feeling that this case is going to set a precedent for stand your ground. So gun laws and the right to bear arms and protect property. George Zimmerman in some ways has become a poster child for that.
I'm glad he got $200,000.
You're glad he got $200,000? Did you write a check?
Absolutely. No, I didn't write a check. But I'm glad he got $200,000 because I don't. If the evidence that I believe exists comes out, I want him to be convicted as guilty with the best legal representation he can afford.
So here's the thing, what if he gets off? People are saying, oh, it's the anniversary of the LA riots, this could happen again. Do you think that black people will take to the streets if Zimmerman walks?
That's a good question. I actually talked to Rodney King just a few days ago. He has a new book out and he's talking about the riots, and that's one of the things he said is that he doesn't think that America will riot now as they did 20 years ago when the police were found not guilty of his assault on videotape.
I think it's a totally different piece. If you remember the time then, there wasn't a lot of leadership out on the front of the Rodney King case. I think that there was so much expectation because of this footage that these police officers were going to be convicted, that there was nobody doing proactive work to say if it doesn't happen, how do we remain calm?
Let me change gears for a second. Last week, you two in particular were at the White House. Can you all talk about some of the stuff you talked about and what you were doing there?
We were there with Valerie Jarrett and the head of their communications team.
Okay.
So it was a great conversation. One of the things that I think we can say is I got the sense that they're very committed to making sure that young people, women, and people of color turn out to the polls.
Well, I think the White House versus the campaign,
that's interesting,
is interested in making sure that people are clear on what this administration has done.
Another thing that's happening in this election is that you begin to see the rise of all these black Republican organizations that are committed to getting more black folk in the ranks and providing opposition to President Obama. What do you all make of that?
It's not new. I mean, anybody that's been working in presidential politics in particular has seen black Republicans organizing. Sometimes it's been with greater cooperation from the GOP. I think in these times it's with greater opposition from the GOP. There's not a lot inside the GOP that's welcoming black folks in a way that there might have been when Gillespie was running the GOP. So I think it's interesting. I think black folks have got to remember that, one, all of us are not Democrats, and that these black folks are concerned about the economy, they're concerned about issues. And some of them even voted for President Obama.
But there is this perception that if you do not vote for President Barack Obama, and you're a black person, you are in some way a sellout.
Sure. A race traitor.
A race traitor, exactly. So you might as well be Clarence Thomas to them.
Will it feel inauthentic to people, though, if they look to 2008 and they see this grand campaign you know, which was excellently run. Then they see a presidency, and then they see another grand campaign again. Well, they feel like he's just a really good campaigner, but not a real good president?
Well, I think it's a call to remembrance in some ways to say, think about what we've been through together. I'm the same man that I was in 2008, and we've traveled this journey together. And I think a lot of people are prone, regardless of mistakes that have been made, points of disappointment, to stick with what they know.
But I'll be very honest with you. I think that this campaign is really going to be more concerned with black women than black people.
Right.
Black women as a demographic turned out more for President Obama than any demographic. And I think that what we're seeing the Democrats do around messaging and women's rights and women and women's issues is going to be interesting, because I think there's a place there for some discourse which will energize black women specifically that I don't know if the campaign even really has.
Well, that's
the ability to do.
They do have Michelle
folks.
Obama, and she's his best. She's not his secret weapon. She's his best weapon.
Yes. I have to ask you this: who is the person that Mitt Romney chooses to be his running mate?
I don't know.
Condoleezza Rice, without question.
But she said she's not
No,
interested, right?
but everybody says they're not interested. But if, to me, if there's an ideal candidate, she appeals to the old school Republican base. She has a ton of credibility there. And she also, I think, has been so firm in what she believes that she'll appeal to some of the old school conservatives that Romney's going to have a very difficult time getting excited about his campaign.
Last week, Vice President Biden talked about the policy of walking softly and carrying a big stick. He then punctuated his address by saying, and trust me, President Obama has a big stick. There was like an audible groan in the audience, and people for the next 2 days in the news cycle have been talking about how just mortifying that was.
There was an audible groan, and there was also a, that's what she said.
Right. It has been a great time having you on, but I'm going to go now before I get in any more trouble.
Yes.
Rahiel Testamariam, Jeff Johnson, Lola Agunnaike, thank you so much for being here. Stay right there. We'll be back with more Our World with Black Enterprise. Up next, how lions, tigers, and bears help one man start a legacy.
I never once did not believe that I couldn't do anything. Impossible was never an option for me.
Our World with Black Enterprise is brought to you in part by State Farm. Find an agent or get a quote at statefarm.com.